Once the name Hitler handpicked for the position of successor to Germany, in the end, Rudolf Hess was the man who caused the Führer to scream in a fit of mad rage, shunned on by the entire regime and cursed as a mental case. Sounds absurd, right? But that is exactly the most shocking plot twist of 1941, when tensions between the Allies and the Axis were escalating. Once a loyal associate attached to Hitler for over 2 decades, Rudolf Hess, deputy Führer of Nazi Germany, flew a plane alone to England to sue for peace. He left Hitler behind, diving straight into the enemy's den with a delusion of peace. Why did Hitler's right hand sever his own lifeline and choose betrayal in such an insane way? What made him gamble to trust in the absurd outcome of a war with no point of return? Let's decode this leading controversial figure of the 20th century. To understand Hess's madness, we must go back in time, returning to where he was born. Not in the old oak forests of Germany, Hess let out his first cry in 1894 in Alexandria, Egypt. Hess's childhood passed under the scorching sun of North Africa and the long shadows of ancient pyramids. Alexandria was a crossroads of cultures, but also the cradle of legends about the afterlife, rebirth, and curses. Perhaps that very atmosphere, thick with mysticism, seeped into the soul of the boy Hess, creating a man hypersensitive to things invisible to the naked eye. It is necessary to know that Hess was not a street thug. He grew up in affluence and was an intellectual. When World War I broke out, he was a talented pilot, a key skill for the later twist. Soaring through the sky, hovering between life and death, further reinforced his belief in invisible forces. He didn't view the sky as a battlefield, but as a great star map guiding destiny. In 1920, that destiny took the name Adolf Hitler. If Hitler was the raging fire, then Hess was the one pouring the oil. Hearing Hitler speak for the first time at a beer hall in Munich, Rudolf Hess was as if hypnotized. He didn't see an unemployed corporal screaming, but Rudolf Hess seemed to be seeing an idol. With a weak soul and a yearning to find a faith, Hess dedicated his entire soul to Hitler. The peak of this strange relationship was in 1923, after the failed beer hall putsch. Both were thrown into Landsberg prison. Here, within 4 cold stone walls, Rudolf Hess performed a task that shaped human history, but in the quietest way. While Hitler paced in the cramped cell, spewing out mad, chaotic, and hate-filled streams of thought, Hess patiently sat by the old typewriter. Clack, clack. The sound of the typewriter rang out steadily day and night. Hess didn't just transcribe, he edited, he organized, he breathed soul into those disjointed ideas to create the book Mein Kampf, My Struggle. Hess turned himself into a shadow. He was the first to call Hitler Führer, leader. He was the creator of the infamous salute. He built the launch pad for his idol to fly high while he stepped back, enjoying the happiness of an absolutely loyal servant. In 1933, Hitler took power. Rudolf Hess became deputy Führer. That should have been the most glorious moment. But ironically, it was the beginning of the collapse. When the Nazi war machine began to operate and roar, it needed pragmatists. Calculating and brutal minds like Goering or propagandists like Goebbels quickly encroached and seized power, controlling the stage of the Reich's apparatus. It didn't need a dreamer and worshiper like Hess. Gradually, Hess realized he was being pushed to the fringe. He still sat there, in the group photos, but his voice no longer carried weight. Hitler, his god, became increasingly distant, busy with military generals. Hess officially became redundant in the very empire he contributed to building from the early days. The hurt, jealousy, and fear of being forgotten pushed Hess into a state of extreme psychological instability. He retreated into his own world, a world full of magic and morbid obsessions. Hess's bizarre behaviors began to surface, making even the most brutal fascists shake their heads. This is when the strangest stories about the deputy Führer began to spread among the Nazi top brass. Let's step into Hess's bedroom. It was not a place of rest, it was a spiritual laboratory. Hess suffered from severe obsessive-compulsive disorder regarding health and energy rays and the Earth's magnetic fields. Every night before sleeping, instead of reading military reports like other statesmen usually did, Hess performed a bizarre ritual. He used a dowsing rod to probe all over the floor. In his paranoid mind, the ground was full of underground water streams carrying deadly magnetic fields. He believed that if the bed was placed in the wrong position, right over a countercurrent, negative energy would invade the body. He was ready to move the bed around the room every night, rearranging corners just to avoid these invisible streams. But that's not all. If you looked up at the ceiling, right above the pillow of the second most powerful man in Germany, not a map of the country or a world map, you would see a unique sight: magnets. Hess hung large magnets dangling right over his head while sleeping. He believed in a pseudo-scientific medical theory that the magnetic field of the magnets would suck all toxins, dark thoughts, and diseases out of the brain. Not only sleep, but even Hess's eating and drinking became a topic of gossip. He suffered from paranoia about being poisoned. At lavish Nazi banquets while generals raised glasses of wine and ate roast meat, Hess pulled out a private box. Inside were bland dishes, prepared according to a strict biological method. He refused to use Western medicine, replacing it with piles of homeopathic vials, strange herbs that he believed were elixirs. Hess also believed blindly in astrology. Every decision, from where to go, whom to meet, to signing papers, he consulted the position of the stars. He believed in telepathy and frequently tried to send messages by thought to Hitler, believing that the spiritual connection between the two still existed. It was these eccentric, one-of-a-kind habits that made Hess stand out in the most negative way in the leadership ranks. In the eyes of ruthless old associates like Bormann or Goebbels, Hess had become a clown. They mocked his effeminacy and weak nerves. They considered him mentally unbalanced, a harmless madman sitting in the wrong seat. But that mockery was a fatal mistake. They didn't understand that a fanatic, when cornered, when stripped of faith and attention, would be capable of doing things extraordinary or insane. To what extent? The magnets, the underground streams and the star maps, the wild dreams, all did not calm Hess down. On the contrary, they were whispering into his ear a bold idea. An idea that he believed was a divine mission. An all-in gamble to prove to the world, and most importantly to Hitler, that Rudolf Hess was not redundant. He would be the hero saving Germany. May 10th, 1941. Europe was burning. On the ground, millions were fighting fiercely, blood flooding the sky. In the sky, the German Air Force, Luftwaffe, was spreading terror over London. But at Augsburg Airport in southern Germany, a strange event, going against every rule of war, was silently taking place. A tall man, clad in a leather flight suit, quietly climbed into the cockpit of a heavy fighter, Messerschmitt Bf 110, a class of top modern combat aircraft at that time. He didn't carry bombs to drop on the enemy's head. He carried a stack of maps, a little cash, family photos, and a collection of bizarre homeopathic medicines. That man was Rudolf Hess, Deputy Führer of the Third Reich. He prepared to perform an action that, if successful, would change the face of the world. And if it failed, he would be considered the maddest person in history. No one knew about this trip, not his wife, not the generals, and especially not Adolf Hitler, Dolph. To understand the level of madness of that day, we must look at Hess's preparation. He didn't wake up and decided to fly away on a whim. It was the result of months of calculation in the dark. Hess had secretly practiced piloting, but because he was a spiritual devotee, Hess didn't choose the flight date based on weather or military factors. He believed that May 10, 1941, was the time the constellations were arranged in a special order, signaling a great change, an opportunity for peace. Hess believed the universe was opening a narrow door, and he was the one chosen to step through it. Before taking off, Hess left a letter for Hitler, only knowing that after reading the letter, Führer Hitler went mad with anger and screamed. At 17:45, the engines roared. The plane tore the wind rushing into the sky, leaving behind Germany and Hess's entire political career. Imagine Hess's feeling at that moment, alone in the cramped cockpit amidst the deafening roar of two Daimler-Benz engines. No navigator, no radio contact, only him and the night falling. Hess had to perform a mission impossible even for the most seasoned pilots: fly low close to the sea surface to avoid radar, cross the cold North Sea, and pinpoint exactly a tiny spot in Scotland, Dungavel Castle of the Duke of Hamilton. Why the Duke of Hamilton? In his delusional imagination, Hess believed the Duke was the leader of the opposition faction in England, someone ready to overthrow Churchill to shake hands with Germany. Hess believed he would land, be welcomed as an envoy, drink tea together and sign a peace treaty, then return to Germany as a hero. But reality was much crueler. When Hess approached the British coast, the radar system detected him. The Spitfire fighters of the Royal Air Force immediately scrambled with orders to shoot him down. When fuel ran out, the gas gauge needle hit the red line. Below was the thick darkness of the Scottish countryside. He didn't find any runway. There was no other choice. Hess decided to abandon the plane. But escaping from a Bf-110 rushing at high speed was no joke. Hess had to invert the plane, open the cockpit cover, and parachute. The wind lashed his face. The parachute opened white in the black night. The plane worth millions of marks crashed into the ground and exploded into a giant fireball. Hess floated in the night sky of Scotland, and then he landed heavily. The impact caused his ankle to snap. The second most powerful man in Germany now lay flattened on the grass of a remote farm in pain and helpless. The first person to find him was not the Duke nor a commando, but David McLean, a simple Scottish farmer. Hess, though in pain, still tried to keep an aristocratic demeanor. He spoke in English, mixed with a German accent. "I am Captain Alfred Horn. I have an important message for the Duke of Hamilton." Hess believed the Alfred Horn drama would help him meet the British upper class. He didn't know that, the moment the handcuffs snapped onto his hands, he had officially entered a prison from which he would never escape, in both the literal and figurative sense. News of Hess parachuting into Scotland spread as fast as a global electric shock. In Berlin, upon receiving the letter Hess left behind, Hitler went into a fit of rage never seen before. Witnesses recounted that the Führer screamed and was angry to the extreme. What did Hitler fear? Did he fear Hess would reveal the plan to attack the Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa, about to take place? Or was there something else? Immediately, Goebbels' propaganda machine operated at full capacity. Just as instructed in the letter, Hitler announced to the world, "Rudolf Hess, he is a mentally disturbed person, a victim of delusional hallucinations." Overnight, from a hero, Hess was smeared by his own comrades into a madman. His wife and children were monitored, assistants were arrested, and astrologers, the people Hess trusted, were thrown into concentration camps in a large-scale purge of superstition. And in London? Prime Minister Winston Churchill did not view Hess as an envoy. He viewed Hess as a priceless intelligence gift or a trap. Hess was immediately put in solitary confinement. The dream of drinking tea with the Duke of Hamilton vanished into smoke. Instead, there were rotating dungeons and endless interrogations by MI6. From a powerful figure once standing second in the Nazi Reich, Hess became the enemy of both sides. The dream of peace vanished into smoke, opening a prison sentence that was the longest and loneliest of the century. After the war ended, Rudolf Hess was dragged before the Nuremberg International Military Tribunal in 1946. If other defendants like Göring or Ribbentrop tried to defend themselves or act defiantly, Hess acted out a strange play. He sat there, his deep-set eyes looking aimlessly into the void. He pretended to lose his memory. He didn't recognize old comrades, didn't remember who he was, even nonchalantly sat reading a novel while the court was sentencing his accomplices to death. Many psychiatrists were invited. Their conclusions contradicted each other. Some said Hess was truly mad, others said he was a great actor. Finally, in his last words, Hess suddenly became lucid again and declared a sentence that made the whole courtroom feel a chill down their spines. "I do not regret anything." Hess escaped the hanging sentence. He received a life sentence. But perhaps death would have been gentler than what was waiting for him ahead. In 1947, 7 Nazi war criminals were transferred to Spandau Prison. Over time, some finished their sentences, some were released due to illness. By 1966, after Albert Speer and Baldur von Schirach were released, the Iron Gate slammed shut. Inside, only Rudolf Hess remained. From 1966 to 1987, Hess became the loneliest prisoner on the planet. Imagine this mental torture. Every month, the prison management right rotated between 4 powers: USA, UK, France, and the Soviet Union. Hess was forbidden to talk about the war. He was forbidden to read newspapers with political news. The outside world changed dizzyingly. Humans went to the moon. The Cold War was tense. The Berlin Wall fell. But Hess's time seemed to stop in 1941. Why not release him? The Western countries, UK, USA, France, many times proposed releasing Hess for humanitarian reasons. He was a frail, harmless old man. But the Soviet Union always used the veto right to say no. Did Moscow hate Hess? Or were they afraid that if Hess were free, he would reveal that the flight in 1941 actually had the green light of British intelligence to together destroy the Soviet Union? Hess's existence was a live hostage, a political chess piece that no side dared to discard. August 17, 1987. Berlin summer was hot. Rudolf Hess, at this time 93 years old, walked in the garden as usual. He stepped into a small hut on the prison grounds to rest. A few minutes later, guards discovered Hess lying motionless. An extension cord was wrapped tight around his neck. He was dead. The official conclusion was issued immediately: suicide by hanging. But right when the report was published, Hess's family and independent forensic experts pointed out absurdities to the point of insulting the viewer's intelligence. Physical impossibility. At 93, Hess was an invalid. He had severe arthritis, trembling hands, could not button his shirt or tie his shoelaces himself. To hang himself, he had to reach his hands high, manipulate objects beyond his reach, requiring hand strength and certain dexterity. How could an old man who couldn't lift his hands over his shoulder do that in a few short minutes of the guard's absence? Accusing traces, Dr. Wolfgang Spahn, who performed the second autopsy at the family's request, found marks on Hess's neck that were horizontal and parallel. Meanwhile, people who hang themselves usually have V-shaped marks pointing up towards the ears. This mark resembled being strangled from behind, strangulation, more than hanging oneself, hanging. Mysterious motive. Why at this time? In 1987, Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev was implementing the glasnost, openness policy, and had signaled that he might agree to release Hess. If Hess was about to be free, why did he commit suicide? A darkest, most chilling hypothesis was put forward. Because he was about to be free, he had to die. There is a shocking hypothesis that Hess's son, Wolf Rudiger Hess, spent his whole life pursuing possibly British secret agents, SAS or MI6, broke into the prison and helped Hess end his life. Why? Because if Hess got out of prison and held a press conference, he could reveal secret agreements between Nazi Germany and the British royal family in 1941 that Churchill had tried to hide for half a century. That Britain might have once considered allying with Hitler, that would be a political shock destroying the credibility of the Allies. And the actions of the authorities after Hess's death further raised suspicions. Only within 48 hours after Hess died, the entire hut in the garden, the crime scene, was burned down. A few months later, the entire massive Spandau prison was completely demolished. People used machines to crush every brick, crush even the concrete into fine powder. Then, they transported tons of that stone powder to the North Sea and dumped it into the ocean bottom. Not a single fragment was allowed to exist. They built on it a shopping center and a parking lot for the British Army. As if they wanted to wipe clean every trace, ensuring that no one could search for anything from Spandau anymore. Prisoner number 7 was dead. The prison had disappeared. The secret was buried. Rudolf Hess's life was a chain of unsolved paradoxes. Rudolf Hess's life was haunted by invisible forces. He lived like a sleepwalker in the midst of a fierce battlefield, using star maps to determine national fate. From a delusional flight seeking peace to 46 long years in the loneliest prisons in the world. Madness took him to the peak of power, but it was also that madness that imprisoned him within 4 cold walls until his last breath. History calls him a war criminal. Medicine calls him a mental patient. As for us, we see one of the greatest mysteries of the 20th century. Was Hess a madman led by hallucinations, or a pawn sacrificed in the political chess game of the big guys? The file has closed, but the questions remain. In your opinion, whose hand truly tightened that electric cord that day? A helpless, desperate 93-year-old man, or a force wanting to bury the past forever? And what would the world be like if he had succeeded in that Sky case that year? Leave your deduction below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to continue decoding the next historical mysteries.